What's up, everyone? I am not the expert. I played college football 25 early, and to be honest, there's some things in college football 25 that I feel is lacking and has me worried. I'm talking about things in gameplay, Road to Glory, Dynasty, all of it. I will go more in depth later on in this video, but basically EA flew me down to their studio in Orlando, along with other creators and media members. I want to be clear though, I am not here to advertise for EA. I think people are skeptical of what I have to say about the game simply because EA offered me the experience to play the game early. You know, they're putting you up in a hotel, giving you the special experience. So I totally understand that perspective. But I do want to make it clear that my opinion is my own. I'm not like a bot advertisement. No one is giving me a script of what to say. I remain critical in my feedback because I want college football video gaming to be great. I tell the devs my fears of what could go wrong and what they need to change in the future, which is another reason why I'm going to be critical in this video. There's things missing the mark that has me worried for the game as a whole. And shocker, College Football 25 is not a perfect game, and I will explain some things and some shortcomings that I've noticed. While I will share my thoughts, this is not a comprehensive review. It's just early impressions from the presentation they gave us to the creators and about 4 hours of gameplay experience that I had in play now when down at the studio. There are also things a lot of people are misinterpreting about the game that I want to clarify, especially about wear and tear, Road to Glory, and Dynasty. And there's a huge list of things I want to talk about in this video. You can probably see by the length of it, so I'll just run down the list starting with gameplay. So with gameplay, everyone's initial thoughts is like, does College Football 25 feel like Madden? The simple answer is no, I didn't feel that way at all. My experience with Madden gameplay is it's stiff, it's annoying, and just generally not fun to play. No, look, he's frozen again! I can't move! And Madden gameplay has a variety of issues, but I feel the superhuman corners to be like the most annoying, and it seems like contested passes always end up in interceptions. They're like looking the opposite way too, and they just turn around and always snag it. It's just, you know what I'm talking about if you played Madden. It's annoying that way. But with College Football 25, I, like everybody else, was worried, like, is this going to be a Madden reskin is kind of like the main talking point. And before I saw the gameplay, that was going through my mind. Once I got my hands on the game though, I did not get that sense whatsoever. This really shouldn't be a surprise, but this was without a doubt the best the Frostbite engine has ever felt. And that's coming from somebody who has not enjoyed the gameplay experience from every single Madden game on that engine, which is all the more reason why this game seems to get it right. College Football 25's gameplay feels, I guess, loose is the way I would describe it, in a good way. Like, it felt like I could run the ball without being suction cupped to the defensive line. You know what I'm talking about. I did not notice any overpowered cornerbacks in my gameplay. 50-50 balls actually felt like a 50-50, and the improved passing trajectory is one of my favorite improvements in the game. It really opens up avenues for all sorts of throws that were completely impossible in past games. I'll give an example. Like, a fade route is now a viable option. You can also layer the football in between defenders. It just feels so much smoother. And you also see examples of this in the trailer, like we see the deep ball from Jalen Milroe to the back of the end zone, which is awesome to see that. You can also see this LSU throw to the wide receiver on the sidelines, putting it to where only the receiver can make a play on the ball. That's very pretty stuff. I love to see that. I also reacted positively on Twitter in my community post saying that I enjoyed the gameplay experience, and some people seem to not believe me that I'm some like EA shill or something. But come on guys, when we look at the history between NCAA games versus the Madden games, I think pretty much every case NCAA has had the more enjoyable on-the-field experience than every Madden game. I don't think that's really a hot take either. In a lot of cases, I would argue the better off-the-field depth as well. Like, there's a reason people love NCAA and missed it when it was gone. And I'm not saying any of those games were perfect, not even close. And I'm not saying College Football 25 is perfect either, but it is light years above Madden 24 in the gameplay sense. And on my first initial experience, I thought the gameplay was damn good. But there's a reason it's only initial experiences. I only had 4 hours of gameplay. That's not really enough to make a full opinion. But Drewski, quit just glossing up the game. Let's talk about other things that I noticed. We saw in the gameplay, there are some bugs in there for sure. Like, we saw one play where this guy's pants are turning the other color. I can get over that. This was an older build, obviously, that they used for the trailer, and this is not going to be reflected on the final release. At least you hope, right? But there are some legitimate questions people raised about certain plays in there, like these corners doing a quick spin around to intercept the ball ball, or some other players like missing blocks and stuff. And for that, I'll say this. I'm not expecting the gameplay to be absolutely perfect. I obviously don't want things to feel completely unrealistic or out of whack or anything that would like break my immersion, but I'm not some maniac expecting this to be a shot-for-shot recreation of real-life football, if that makes sense. I think in reality, a 100% recreation of true-life football, I don't even know if it'd be that fun. Like, I appreciate realism when possible, but to an extent, because overall, I just want the game to be fun. Like I said, it's a video game. I could nitpick about whether this specific interaction over here is messy or that block was off. I'm not really interested in breaking any of those things down personally. I feel like my experiences, or I guess not my experience because not the expert, but from my view, I feel like I'm best served talking about the features and the depth of the other modes. To sum it all up, I feel College Football 25 gameplay was better than just good enough, you know? I talked about a few negative things there, but let's talk about some of the promising animations I saw. In my gameplay experience, I immediately noticed the unique throwing animations. They felt fresh. I also liked the skill moves that they showcased in the trailer. But one thing in my personal experience, I liked how the left stick gameplay felt. It felt especially smooth in this game. The simplest way I could describe it is it felt like I could soft juke, if that makes sense. I could zigzag around players without needing the right stick to like juke, which that gave me some NCAA 14 vibes in that respect. However, that's enough on gameplay. I want to talk about presentation, and then later on we're going to move to Road to Glory and Dynasty. With presentation, I already talked about the scoreboard. I like that. I think most people do. And we even do have some confirmation that records will be under the team names on the scoreboard during Dynasty mode, which is cool. And if you didn't know, there's like college football revamped guys that were hired to be on the dev team for College Football 25, which I think is an awesome decision. And you can see influences from College Football Revamped all over the game. And I can tell just by talking to the devs in the studio that their presence elevated this game massively. Like, the team select menu is absolutely beautiful. And when you compare it to NCAA 14, this is an unbelievable upgrade. But I do want to clarify one question I saw on Reddit about these little signs that pop up in Team Select. These are only cosmetic and are basically just there to show your teams like readied up. Some people thought they were like alternate logos you could use in game, but that is not the case. I do appreciate some little details, like in Team Select you're able to sort by conferences, which is nice because you used to have to be able to like sort alphabetically, which would take quite a while. I think focusing on quality of life things is a nice touch. I'm glad they're considering that. I felt the menus in this game were massively quicker than in recent Maddens. Like, we all know the Madden menus were so slow, and it made the game honestly a chore to play. Like, there's a lot of times I would try to record content for this game and I would just quit simply because I was bored going in between the menus, like not even making it to the game. So I was happy to see that they improved this for College Football 25. If I had to speculate, I imagine this is a symptom of it being only on next-gen consoles instead of like being on PS4 and PS5. No matter the reason, I dig it. I also want to talk about some other details people might not know about, specifically for presentation. So in the little like PowerPoint they showed us at EA, they showed us a recreation of like the Mo Bamba at Penn State thing in game. The one that they recreated in-game was incredible. It was absolutely epic. The stadium pulse maxed out. The screen was shaking. I legitimately got goosebumps watching it, and I think everybody else in the room did too. Like, I think I remember turning over to Bengal, who was sitting next to me, and I think I said out loud, "Damn, that was cool." So this game absolutely nails the atmosphere aspect. However, I must state that my headphones at my gameplay station was not working. So when I was playing, I could not hear audio for my gameplay session. But even though I couldn't hear anything, the visual presentation of like the traditions, the player reactions, the fans, all of that, like the mascots, everything, it was incredible. And I'm not being hyperbolic when I say this. This is probably the best atmosphere I've ever seen in a football video game. For an example, I played with Auburn, my alma mater. I'll read off the tweet that I put out for this describing my experience. First game in College Football 25 was beautiful. I played with Auburn football in Jordan-Hare Stadium. The atmosphere was insane. First time seeing the Eagle flight, the team run out, the mega video board, which is also the first time we've ever seen that in the video game. Seeing Aubie, the student section. I shed a tear, man. It's like I was at home with my alma mater. Hashtag War Eagle. Like, seriously, it was truly special. They nailed the details. And as far as my understanding, they did that with all 134 teams in the game. However, the community noticed some slip-ups there in that gameplay trailer. They said the Red River rivalry, you got the like fans on the wrong side. You're supposed to flip-flop them. Or how about Texas State, their upper deck? Where is it? It's not there. We all brought up these issues to our contacts at EA. They said they were already aware of these issues, and they had already made the fix before the trailer even went out, which is a little confusing. Like, why would you release the trailer with issues you already knew about in game? I'm not sure. I'm not the one who made that decision, but it's nice to know that they got it fixed, I guess. But another example of like the devs going far and beyond for the presentation is like for Arkansas State. They got this like waterfall in their stadium, which I didn't even know was a thing, but they got that in game. That's insane detail for like a mid-major school, which shows you they took it seriously for all 134 teams in game. But that's enough about presentation. Let's move on to the modes I am genuinely worried about and the ones I care about more than anything, which is Road to Glory and Dynasty. However, none of the developer deep dives are out yet. I'm under an NDA, so I have to be careful of what I can talk about. But let's start with Road to Glory. I think a lot of people, including myself, are bummed about no high school and Road to Glory. And people keep making the joke that, like, how is it a Road to Glory without the road? Which is a funny way to put it, I will give them that. I don't know where people got this from, but there is some misinformation spread around that this is some sort of story mode or something. That is entirely false, I'll tell you why. And I think with Road to Glory, like I said in the title, I am worried, but it's honestly more because I think people are misunderstanding this mode entirely. I genuinely believe the core gameplay loop is better than people think. I know that might be crazy with no high school, so I know you might be skeptical, but I'll explain my thoughts. First off, this game is not heavy on cinematics. It is not a linear story mode like Long Shot or something. I would describe College Football 25 Road to Glory as gameplay focused with light RPG elements. And from what I can tell, they took elements from NCAA 06, NCAA 11, and NCAA 14 while adding in modern elements like wear and tear and brand exposure, which is basically NIL under a different name. And the three games I mentioned that they got inspiration from were some of my favorite Road to Glory experiences, which is all the more reason why I'm optimistic for this game mode. But I do want to reiterate, no high school gameplay does indeed stink. I think we can all agree to that. And I know people really loved having the power fantasy of scoring like 8 touchdowns a game, increasing your star rating every week, and getting offers over time. That was fun. And I hope they bring that back sometime in the future. Like, I want to be competing for high school state championships. That was a good time. However, that system had its annoyances too. I did enjoy the high school games, but for probably like a game or two, and then it starts to get a little bit repetitive. Like 8 to 12 games before even starting the college career, I felt was a little bit too much. I think we should meet in the middle somewhere, like the high school playoffs I feel like was a good balance, but let me know in the comments below how much high school gameplay you want. Like being able to compete for the high school playoffs, I felt like that added to the lore and like the headcanon for me. However, I seriously do think that the new system has more potential than you think though, especially when we're talking about replayability and role-playing aspects, which I'll explain here. With the new system, we know that you can select between 2 stars all the way up to a 5-star, and your initial rating will be tied to your star rating. So if you're a 2-star, you're 65 overall, and you go all the way up the ladder. When you're a 5-star, you are a 79 overall out the gate. You can also select your recruit interests, just like a recruit would be in Dynasty mode. Do you want to care about your proximity to home? Do you want to care about your pro potential, your playing time, campus lifestyle, that kind of thing? Do you want to focus on brand exposure? So even though there is no high school gameplay experience, there is still a recruiting process. Like I mentioned, you could select your player interest and that will narrow down the teams available. I think you would still have the option to commit to any team you wanted, but that doesn't mean you will be guaranteed any playing time everywhere. For example, if you walk on at Alabama as a 2-star player, you will be grinding for a long time to move up the depth chart. With the ability to transfer every season, it's going to make this Road to Glory experience feel fresh and new as well. Like you could start at a small school and you can work your way up the ranks of teams while your player progresses, so it's going to feel natural. So when you're terrible, you can be at a low-rated school. When you're mid, you can be at a mid-rated school. And when you're elite, you can go to one of those top dogs. So it's like a natural progression that feels nice. And I don't think we can ever say that in a Road to Glory experience. You usually just choose one school and you're stuck there for eternity. I like change in career modes. However, I am not sure if teams are like recruiting you after you have already signed to a school though. So like if you're looking to transfer in year 2, I have no idea if teams are going to be courting you like they did in year 1. Is it like an automatic transfer thing? No clue. Wish I would have paid more attention. But the reason I believe that this system is good for role-playing and replayability is because in the old system of playing out the high school games, it was a little more difficult to control which star rating you would end up being. Especially if you wanted to be like a low star rating player, you'd have to like intentionally stink, which kind of broke the immersion for me. With this system where you like start start out by choosing which star rating you want to be. You're going to have the option of role-playing whether you either want to have the long grind of an underdog 2-star recruit or have the immediate power fantasy of a 5-star right away. And once you are in college, I think the general gameplay loop I saw was actually awesome, and I don't see enough people talking about it. The gameplay loop has you managing GPA, health, which is tied to wear and tear, your training, which is tied to XP, and your brand, which is basically NIL. You'll notice some things I said earlier about this game taking inspiration from older games. NCAA 06 had minigames, and there's other great things from NCAA 06 that I can't talk about here under the NDA, so I'll move on. NCAA 11 had a weekly schedule where you had to manage your GPA. NCAA 14 had Coach Trust, and this game combines some of the great elements from older games that I loved, and it adds in the new elements of wear and tear, brand exposure, and transferring. So let's dive deeper. There's like 4 bars you gotta focus on with your weekly time. You can be academically ineligible if you don't focus on your schoolwork. Now, there is no interactive gameplay for quizzes or tests in the game, but you must keep on top of your studies in a time management sense. Or you won't be seeing the field until you get those grades up, similar to NCAA 11. Like, I became academically suspended in that game for a little bit in one of my road to glories. Not committing time to recovery could put your health at risk as the hits add up over the course of the year. And not committing time to training is going to limit your potential XP gains. And if you completely ignore brand exposure, you're going to be missing opportunities for game-changing sponsorships. I think one of the only examples we know of so far is like you can get like a cryogenic sponsorship that'll boost recovery permanently. So these are the RPG elements I was referring to. You can't max out each bar. You have limited time each week, so you're going to have to prioritize each time whatever you deem valuable. And each of the 4 categories has potential benefits if you focus on it fully and potential punishments if neglected. And I think some people were scared and clung to what was told to them about the 10 to 20 hour experience for this career mode, which, to be honest with you, I don't think is anything to worry about, because when we look at history, like the NCAA 14 Road to Glory experience, for example, I recently did a playthrough of that, and I felt like it was about 10 to 20 hours, so it doesn't feel any different. I think they just want you to know it is shorter than a Dynasty experience, which who knows how long the typical experience for that takes. 10 to 20 hour experience basically tells me they're not trying to waste your time with long cinematics. They want you to dabble in the RPG mechanics, and they want you to get back on the field playing, which I think is the way it should be. I, for one, am happy about this. Like, I don't want long linear cutscenes with cringy dialogue or weird podcast clips where they're saying generic vague things about my player like, wow, this guy is bad. He can get better though. After I threw like 800 yards and 9 touchdowns, you know what I mean? That seems to plague a lot of sports games these days. So them avoiding it here, boom, hats off to you guys. Mike Straw also reported that text messages and unique events will be in the game that you can respond to and have different gameplay effects. These are not cutscenes really. I would relate these to kind of like, you know, in Madden 08 when they would send you text messages in superstar mode. No cinematics or anything. So you don't have to worry about it being another forced linear path, but there are like decisions you can make, and the random events have consequences, both positive and negative based on your responses. And I think they said there's a little bit of RNG in that. I don't know. I think that is all I can say about that without getting in trouble here though. So we're gonna have to wait for the Road to Glory deep dive on that. But continuing on more in Road to Glory, it was also reported that position battles are now minigame based. Once again, going back to NCAA 06, we see that inspiration. You have to win 2 out of 3 minigames against the player you're trying to jump on the depth chart. What I found interesting about these is that you don't have the option to replay these. So if you fail, you don't get to cheese it until you win. Failing has consequences. Another interesting note here is that other players on the depth chart are also earning coach trust in the background. So if you're slipping up, throwing a zillion interceptions and play poorly, you could be benched in favor of the CPU player working his butt off behind you. So hopefully all of this put together, describing Road to Glory more in depth gives you a clearer picture of what the mode actually is, and hopefully you can understand why I am so optimistic for the mode despite it having no high school gameplay. If you're still not convinced, that's totally fine. This is only my initial impression of Road to Glory. It's not a final review of the mode. So it's perfectly fine to take my thoughts with a grain of salt, as I have not played the mode directly myself. It's just my interpretation of what I saw in the little PowerPoint they showed us. And once again, the dev deep dive will be coming later on, and that should explain everything more in depth than I ever could. Now let's move on to everyone's favorite mode, Dynasty mode. And I am also worried about this as well. And I think the things I am worried about are the things that came out that we already know are not in the game. Let's start off with no draft classes. I know, it's unfortunate that it's not there, but I think it's not really game ruining for me. Like, I understand EA couldn't put this in the game because of the NFL licensing right. Moving these players over to Madden, there's some like legal issues, especially now that they're signed through NIL. Back in the day when it was just QB number 3, it could have been anybody, you know, wink wink. But that's also one of the reasons why this game went away for 11 years. Like, moving them over to Madden, it's a potential lawsuit, which is a reason why it has me fearful that we won't be seeing this feature in future college football video games. And this ties along with massively limited player editing, which I feel genuinely stinks from a player perspective. I think we all understand why with the potential legal troubles here as well. Like, players that opted out, like Arch Manning, we can't allow you to create that. We get that. And when I was talking to the devs, obviously they are bummed that they can't give us full customization. They don't want to make it so you can't be changing players' names. But the reality here is that having limited player editing is one of the few reasons that this game can even exist. And after 11 years without NCAA football, I will accept this sacrifice for me to be able to play right now. Obviously, I am not thrilled that we have limited player editing in the game. It makes it extremely difficult from a content perspective. It lowers creativity. And I think this has me more worried than anything because it's like totally out of our control and there doesn't seem to be hope of it coming back. But let me break down more specifically of what I know of what is limited in the editing. We know for a fact you cannot edit opted-in players' names. You cannot bring in opted-out players' names as well for obvious reasons. I don't think you can edit opted-in players' attributes, which is an interesting choice, but I think you can edit their equipment. And I can't remember, but I don't know if you could create a player from scratch, which if that's the case, that would be awful. However, you can definitely create a player in like Road to Glory. And I believe you're able to create a player in Team Builder, which is all the more confusing. So I hope they touch more on the player editing stuff in the Dynasty deep dive. But another thing is you can't create a prospect either, which is another disappointing thing about the game. I thought this one should have been a no-brainer in the game. Like, why can't I put a generic name on a guy and make him whatever overall and recruit him? You know, what's the deal with that? Why can't I make Will Horton in the game? Unless there's a Will Horton that opted out, you know? You better believe I'm going to be giving them hard feedback on this. I want this back in the game. I will pound the table for create a player if it's not there. I guess one silver lining here is they used machine learning for the player faces in game. So not a single player, as far as I know, was scanned into the game. This like AI model used pictures of the players to get a somewhat close to their real life counterpart. Not an exact one, obviously. We all saw that Quinn Ewers picture. The devs described this as generic plus. So obviously it's not one-to-one, but it's relatively close. So it does kind of make them look like cartoonish versions of themselves, but I think it'll make it more naturally when you fit in all the generic players in there. And I think the best part about this is I am under the impression that randomly generated recruits will be taking data from all the other faces to create fresh ones. I can't really confirm it, but I think there's going to be more varied faces than we have ever seen before simply because this model has a huge amount of data to pull from. Now, could this lead to potential weird faces and other issues that we haven't seen before? I have no idea, and it's something we should keep an eye out for. But in theory, all of this sounds pretty cool, and I'm open to try new things. Also, a small anecdote, I appreciated that the faces that they showed us actually look like 18 to 22-year-old kids instead of like balding 30-year-old men that we would see from NCAA 14. No disrespected to the old heads out there, but they kind of broke the immersion for me from time to time. With all of that being said, I still liked what I saw from Dynasty mode. I still need to be careful with what I say here though. I'll do what I did with Road to Glory and talk about the things that the game reminded me of on first look. However, keep in mind that I do not have gameplay experience with Dynasty. I can only talk about the presentation they showed us once again. And what they showed us, recruiting reminded me of games pre-NCAA 14, I think is a good way to describe it. So you have limited time each week and you can make pitches to players. Like you can send a player a DM, you can send the house, that kind of thing. So not the point system from NCAA 14. I can't really speak to how any of this feels because I haven't played the mode myself yet. But my fears that I brought up to the devs just seeing it in theory is this going to be tedious? Is it going to take a long time? And they said, no, it shouldn't, because they said it was basically quote unquote, set it and forget it most of the time. However, it's tough for me to get a read on this because at first glance, it seems like if you want to maximize recruiting, you will still need to put in the effort each week, which I can't really put an estimation on how long that would take, but we thought it would take longer than NCAA 14 just on first glance. But I can't really confirm that. But moving on, the transfer portal, it seems like it's going to be a nice feature in this game. It's being slotted in at a specific time near the end of the year, so it should add a fresh addition to recruiting that we've never seen before. And there's some cool tidbits in there. So like recruits will remember the progress you made on them from their initial high school recruiting. So a transfer portal player will remember if you were number 3 on his high school board, and you will get an edge in transfer portal recruiting because of that in the future. So there is an incentive to stay within the top 3 of a guy, even if you're not necessarily going to land him in year 1. It could pay dividends later. And I like small details like that. It makes it kind of fun, and this is why I'm hopeful for this game mode despite all the disappointing lack of player editing. If they nail the small details, this mode should be awesome. And visually, I will say the menus look pretty sweet. I can't elaborate any further, but you'll see it when the Dynasty deep dive comes out. I'll quickly touch upon the skill tree stuff. It looks like the deepest skill tree we've ever seen in a college football video game. I can't really break it down much more than that, but it seems to be they're going to be pushing us to different play styles, to more than just filling up the recruiting page. We'll see how that actually plays out in game, but I'm excited to try out something new. And also, I felt like just on my initial impressions that coordinators are going to play a bigger impact than before, because you can't maximize every tree. So what you're bad at, the coordinators can lift you up, and what they're good at, you can fill in the gaps with your own skills, that kind of thing. Again, all of this will make more sense in the Dynasty deep dive. Also, I can't speak to the simulation engine. I know a lot of people have questions about that, which obviously could make or break this mode, which is why I'll need to wait until I can get some deep hours into this game to give a full review. Until then, I can't have a full opinion on Dynasty mode. And other small things, Dynasty mode has things you would expect from real life, like the 12-team college football playoff, which is coming to college football this year. We're actually going to be seeing it in game before we see it in real life, which is going to be weird. But I think that's all I can say about Dynasty mode right now. I should move on before I get in trouble. Now let's move on to a feature that seems to have a lot of people worried. But I'll do a reverse on you. I'm not actually worried about this feature, like at all. I actually think it has tremendous potential if tuned properly, of course, and that is wear and tear. People seem to be afraid of this feature. I understand that the Madden fatigue system has left a bad taste in people's mouths. I hated it too. Like, half your starting lineup shouldn't be off the field with no explanation after just like a couple of plays. That's like not a fun gameplay experience at all. It doesn't really make any sense. However, everyone seems to be fundamentally misunderstanding wear and tear from my perspective. And there's a reason I think wear and tear has potential to be game-changing and one of the best features we've ever seen in a football game, period, if done right. And I'll explain why. Many people incorrectly believe wear and tear is a fatigue system. It's not. In their heads, they are fearful of their players constantly getting hurt and leaving the field all the time. And I can assure you this is not the case either. First off, wear and tear is only a physical damage system, meaning that only contact with other players will have an impact on your player's wear and tear. Fatigue is a completely separate system. That is only a conditioning system. That is impacted by exerting more energy on a given play. So let's say you have a scenario where your running back runs for 40 yards, but you are completely untouched by the defense and you run out of bounds. This will have no impact on your wear and tear because you weren't touched. It will impact your fatigue since you ran farther. Obviously, like moving at all will impact your fatigue. And we know that skill moves will use more energy too. However, let's change the scenario. Let's say your running back trucked 3 guys in the process of that 40-yard run. This will impact your player's wear and tear because you were taking contact from other players. But this does not necessarily mean your player is going to be injured. When I spoke to the lead gameplay dev, I mentioned my fears of, is this going to be players getting hurt all the time? Are people going to be annoyed with this feature? He said, this system does not increase injuries necessarily. And I'll explain further. The scenarios where your players are getting hurt are only if you're like being reckless and constantly ignore the warning signs. The lead gameplay dev was like, injuries are kind of like normal in the RNG sense. So like you can still have the fluke injury every now and then, but none of it is more than usual. The punishment wear and tear mainly inflicts is not injuries, but it is the attribute downgrades to specific body parts. Let's say your quarterback throws 50 times a game, throwing the ball a lot. This has no impact on wear and tear and fatigue. Your arm's not going to get more tired if you're just throwing the ball. However, if your quarterback is getting hit on these throws, it will impact him, obviously because he's making contact with other players. Let's say a lot of those hits are on his throwing arm. That could lead to attribute downgrades, specifically in throw power and throw accuracy, which in that case, it makes sense to my brain. Getting hit one time does not mean your players are going to need to leave the field though, but there is a consequence of the hit. Basically think players getting banged up slowly over the course of the game. So like I said, it's not like constantly off the field and always injured. That would be annoying as crap. I would not like the feature if that was the case. I think that this system really wants to encourage players to have smarter, safer gameplay styles like a real coach would recommend real-life players do. But what does this look like in practice? Some examples of trying to be safe is sliding with your quarterback. That's a good idea to avoid hits. Throwing the ball away to avoid sacks. Running the ball out of bounds to avoid contact. And the dev told me directly as well, using the right bumper to protect the football before taking a hit will lower the impact of the hit on the ball carrier. So in my head, I kind of find this to be awesome, because if the system is tuned properly, it really pushes you to play realistic football. And there's still a path to play like Derrick Henry barreling into players if you want. However, there are specific abilities that you'll probably want to protect yourself against wear and tear to make that play style viable. But if you have like a super skinny, skin and bones quarterback trying to truck linebackers twice his size, there's going to be some obvious consequences. Like in past games, you can be reckless and scramble all around if you want, and like it was only a fumbling risk. Now there's attribute punishments for being reckless. Another attribute downgrade I know specifically of is if your legs get damaged, they have potential to lower change of direction and acceleration, which also makes sense to my head. Like if your legs are sore, you won't be as quick as when you're fresh. The attributes, tying them to each body part, it feels logical, which is another reason this system has me really intrigued. Of course, I only have a small sample size in a few Play Now games, and I didn't notice a massive impact necessarily in the games we played. It seems like this system is designed more for the longer playthroughs in like Road to Glory and Dynasty. So over the course of the season, it is something to monitor. And I find that this system wants players to have a balanced play style by not spamming the same play. They want you to spread the ball around. And if you really want to be on top of it, get your players some rest, get some reps for your backup every now and then. And the ways to recover your player's health with wear and tear, you can take your player out of the game, rest him for a few plays. Calling timeouts will give some recovery. At halftime, he'll get some recovery, and in between weeks. But if you hated everything I said about this system and you still don't want it, I think there's a setting to turn it off. But seriously, I don't think you should be worried about it making everyone more injured. That doesn't seem to be what it's meant to be at all. But there are some stories of like a quarterback like having his overall lowered by like 40 points or something. I did not witness this with my own eyes. This is an anecdote from somebody else. I don't know what kind of gameplay experience he was doing, but if it's like out of control and tuned poorly, then it could be a bad system. But I don't think I noticed it in my gameplay experience. And finally, I want to talk about abilities. So my initial fears for abilities were I didn't want them to be like Madden X Factors. Those literally broke the game by hard forcing an outcome, which is kind of stupid. My fears quickly vanished though when the devs assured me that abilities in College Football 25 have no guarantees. They made that very, very clear. And these are only situational stat boosts, and these can be lost entirely if a player gets cold. I think it's closer to something like 2K badges. So starting at bronze, going up to platinum, you can't earn a certain tier unless you have a high enough attribute anyway. So basically, it just means like if you're a good player, you're going to be playing like a good player, like kind of like your attributes. I am hopeful for abilities. They look pretty fun. I would say my only fear with them is I would hope they don't completely like gatekeep animations, if that makes sense. I want everybody to be able to do everything. Like I said, they said it was only a stat increase and not an ability thing, but we'll see if that's true in the actual game. I can't really confirm that. But that's all I have to say about abilities right now. And there's obviously still massive amounts of information to come about this game. I'm excited for it. So if you want to hear more in the upcoming weeks from all the dev deep dives, like we still got to talk about Road to Glory presentation, Dynasty, all of that good stuff. So if you want to stick with me and learn more about the game, consider subscribing. But closing thoughts, you probably started this video thinking I hated the game, but that couldn't be further from the truth. College Football 25 obviously isn't a perfect game, but despite all the things that worry me, all of the flaws, I still thought that this game was damn good on first impressions, which is why I said my initial impression on Twitter and my community post was absolutely incredible. And my personal anecdote, I believe that this is the best development team I've ever seen at EA. Like, it's not even close, especially when you factor in they have guys that worked on older NCAA football games, college football revamp guys. They've got guys from 2K and various other sports games. So truly, I am very optimistic about this game, but they still have to earn my final opinion. So we'll see if EA can stick the landing, so to speak. But thanks again, everybody. Thanks for watching this long video. I just want to say you guys are all legends in my book. I am Drew Morris, Big Ol' Drewski, not the expert, and I'll see all you guys in my next video. Peace.